I'm the Gangster Nerd, and I really enjoy professional wrestling. I've been watching it for most of my life. You know something I don't like about professional wrestling? When I'm following my favorite wrestler, and I find out they're moving from one company to the next. Are they going to be in the World Championship picture? The prospect of future matches. How's the storyline going to play out? All these things are great. And then there's a debut, and that's great. And then they just fade away. This can be maddening for people who watch and wait for everything to play out, such as myself. It went on a lot in the 90s and early 2000s, but unfortunately, it still goes on today. With that in mind, I'm Walt, the most gangster nerd on YouTube.
And these are 10 wrestlers buried for no reason. Zack Ryder, WWE. The only wrestler to build a major fan following via YouTube, Zack Ryder gets points just for figuring out how to get himself over without any help from the writers at WWE. Being a good talent and a decent promo, he managed to find his way to the United States Championship. But out of nowhere, Zack's push got yanked right out from under him, seeing him lose repeatedly to Kane before finally losing the US title to Jack Swagger. Since then, there's been nothing major with Zack Ryder, and that in of itself is a travesty. The Ultimo Dragon, WWE. A lot of wrestling fans in their 30s will remember how badass the Ultimo Dragon really was. He's the only man in history to hold 9 championships simultaneously, even if it looks like 3 of them were the old NWA World Championship. Ultimo Dragon was a credible international talent, being a master of lucha libre, Japanese and American style professional wrestling. That's why when he showed up in WWE in 2003, right after other cruiserweight favorites such as Rey Mysterio and Billy Kidman, everyone was expecting a huge push. What we got instead was anything but. After a quick burst seeing him beat Shannon Moore and Jamie Noble, and then a reasonable loss to Eddie Guerrero, followed by some more wins, he would totally evaporate, not being seen for weeks if not months, only to re-emerge at WrestleMania 20, and we all know what happened there. After that, we would see him one more time against Chavo Guerrero Jr. in his final match, and that was it for his time at WWE. The Patriot, WWE. Del Wilkes had enjoyed an impressive career before coming to WWE, winning multiple championships while in WCW, as well as winning titles in All Japan and the Global Wrestling Federation. Things only appeared to be getting better for the Patriot when he signed with the WWE and was put into a feud with Bret Hart. This would start off great, with the angle being white hot. Bret having recently turned heel and really not being a fan of the US anymore, the angle couldn't have been timed or planned any better. The only problem was the execution. The Patriot would win the first match but would lose when he challenged for the world title. Then he would team with Vader against Bret Hart and Bulldog and lose again. In fact, that's what he did after this point, was just a bunch of losing. It wasn't long before he suffered a torn tricep and was released. What a waste. Mike Awesome in WCW. The Fat Chick Thriller. Shane Douglas, WWE and WCW. Shane Douglas is one of the most sound technical wrestlers of all time. His in-ring work is excellent, he could cut a promo, he had all the it factors. So of course WWE, then WWF, would package him as Dean Douglas, a heel college teacher. He would start out with an initial push, but would end up falling victim to the backstage politics of the Clique. Ended up being used as a lame transition to move the IC belt from Shawn Michaels to Razor Ramon. He would leave the WWE and return to ECW, where he would reclaim his status as a good wrestler and a serious threat, and then would sign with WCW. And what should have been his ascension would become his downfall, as he would end up in the crosshairs of Ric Flair, falling victim to the same backstage politics he had attempted to avoid in WWE. Diamond Dallas Page, WWE. DDP was a megastar in WCW. He was a major player during the Monday Night Wars and was a major part of the NWO storyline. Not to mention he held championships upon championships in WCW before their purchase by the WWE. He would initially participate in the failed Invasion angle, doing absolutely nothing of interest. And then came the stupidest thing WWE ever thought up. Diamond Dallas Page became a super creepy stalker, stalking and terrorizing The Undertaker's wife at the time, Sarah. How anyone at WWE could have possibly foreseen this to be successful is impossible to believe. Diamond Dallas Page, the first person to strike a blow against the NWO, the People's Champion in the late 90s, the voice and face of WCW at one point, had become a sexual predator. At least he was a gentleman about it though. He did end up putting Sarah over. And, since leaving wrestling, has went on to new success with DDP Yoga. Raven in WWE. Raven was an icon of ECW, a legit world champion with victories over other ECW alumni such as the Sandman, Shane Douglas, Tommy Dreamer, and even Dr. Death Steve Williams. After signing with WCW, he would remain over as a performer and would have a solid run as an upper mid-card talent, along with being the leader of Raven's flock. He held titles, had great matches, cut legendary promos, so when word got out he was coming to WWE, fans were elated, but the excitement would not last. Raven was merely a hardcore talent, not really being allowed out of that division, until the truly horrible WCW-ECW invasion angle of 2001, in which he seemingly was forgotten as the ECW star he really was. After this would come the brand extension, and he would be drafted to Raw, but would lose to Tommy Dreamer in a match and would be stuck on Sunday Night Heat. However, after his release in 2003, he would go on to TNA and have one of his best runs ever, a good bounce back. Vader in WWE. Vader is one of, if not the greatest monster heel of all time. Before coming to WWE, he had already won actual world championships all over the actual world. So seeing him come to WWE was going to be a big deal. And originally, it was. He was being managed by Jim Cornette, and his first angle involved attacking Hall of Famer Gorilla Monsoon, drawing him major heat. He would start off with a major push, winning a huge 6-man tag match at WrestleMania, and then moving into a program with then WWE champion Shawn Michaels. But it's here that everything just stopped. After being a little too stiff for the manly man Shawn Michaels, Shawn would politic behind the scenes, and the next thing we know, Vader is out of the world title picture. It didn't take long for WWE to totally forget what they had, as Vader would end up jobbing out. How WWE could mishandle such a hot talent is bizarre to say the least, as he would depart WWE for All Japan Pro Wrestling and go on to win their Triple Crown. Tazz in WWE. To quote What Culture Wrestling, the burial of Tazz was the most egregious waste of ECW wrestling talent ever. In ECW, he was a brutal MMA-style wrestler, unstoppable, suplexing anything he could get his arms around, and eventually becoming an ECW champion. In WWE, he would start off like a bat out of hell. He would debut in WWE's Royal Rumble against the undefeated Kurt Angle, handing the Olympic champion his first defeat. What should have been a huge push would degenerate into a lackluster feud with Jerry Lawler that seen Tazz defeated. And then being relegated to the hardcore division only helped everyone forget who he had been. It can be said that it was the WWE that launched his second career as a color commentator, but when you take into consideration how badass and how good he really was, it's a shame that WWE didn't see what they really had. The entire cruiserweight division of WCW. I know it's not one wrestler, it's a bunch, but that does not take away from the validity. Some of the greatest wrestlers of all time, believe it or not, spent some time in WCW's cruiserweight division. Eddie Guerrero, Rey Mysterio, and Chris Jericho, just to name a few. What WCW could not figure out at the time was what to do or how to use them. In what can only be described as horrible management, cruiserweight wrestlers would manage to get themselves over, only for management to do absolutely nothing with them, letting them go stale. To add to that, once wrestlers were there, they were there, as there was no way to get out of the cruiserweight division, hitting the proverbial glass ceiling. It makes even less sense when you realize that Eric Bischoff had poached the vast majority of them from ECW in an attempt to have the best television product. But why would he invest so much time and money, only inevitably to do nothing with it? It's a disgrace. And that is the list. I know I nailed it. And I know I didn't miss anything. Think I did? Tell me in the comments. I'm Walt, the most gangster nerd on YouTube, and I'll be seeing you soon enough.